Welcome back to Monster Monday. It's the Giant series, and on today's episode, we're going to look at the dumbest of the giants. We're talking, of course, about the hill giant. Okay guys, before I kick it into the video, I have been reminded that I should remind you to subscribe to the channel. And after watching this video, like it if you like it, or dislike it if you don't. And then we'll get into the meat and potatoes about our hill giants. So hill giants to me are a great option because they're kind of found everywhere. You could have a hill giant in like a tropical locale, in a kind of like warm climate situation, jungles. You could have hill giants in like cold areas. You could have hill giants everywhere in between, and that's the great part of them. They don't need to be in a specific zone. You could find them everywhere. Okay, they're kind of like the orc of a giant. There should be a lot of hill giants, and I think they're useful for a lot of different ways. First and foremost, just on the encounter level, like if your party is on an adventure already and they're moving through somewhere and they're kind of like, getting a little bit cocky, throw some hill giant at them. Now, if they're low level, you could do that. You could have like one hill giant take on a group of level 3 people. Somebody might get hurt, but that's fine. That's the nature of the game. If they're mid-level, you throw a couple hill giants at them. If they're higher level, throw like 20 hill giants at them. But the point is they're easy to drop into encounters. Now, the real crux of using the hill giant comes in thinking about how to use them in whole adventures and even recurring through campaigns. So let's learn a little bit more about the lore of the hill giant, and then I'll share my ideas with you for how we're going to use them. Hill giants are selfish, dim-witted brutes that hunt, forage, and raid in constant search of food. Food is their primary motivator. They blunder through hills and forests, devouring what they can, bullying smaller creatures into feeding them. Their laziness and dullness would long ago have spelled their end, if not for their formidable size and strength. Hill giants are primitive. Hill giants think that bigger is better. Hill giants are voracious eaters. Hill giants are stupid and deadly. Hill giants are raging bullies. So these are all kind of the categories in the book, and I'm not going to read the entire thing. I've been relying a little bit too much on the book, and you can go out and buy your own copy of the Monster Manual and read more about it. So what I'm going to do is with this episode is try to kind of summarize the lore, but then integrate that with the ideas. Okay, so let's start off with the primitive concept. So hill giants live in a primitive fashion, right? They are not like the noble cloud giants, or the fortress building fire giants, using their craftsmanship and their forges to create powerful weapons and armor and defenses for their fortresses. They are not the nomadic, reaving frost giants who band together. Hill giants are just dummies. So they're primitive. Think like cavemen, basically, for hill giants. What I think a lot of people assume is that a hill giant, though, because they're dummies and they're primitive, could not be interacted with socially by a party. So my first adventure idea was to consider, how do I use a hill giant against a low-level party without the intent being to kill, like to have a TPK? You could use a hill giant. You could have a hill giant who is dim-witted but curious, and who maybe is willing to barter and socially kind of negotiate with the party in order to have food. Okay, so suppose that you have your first level party and they've been dealing with like whatever, goblins, orcs, kobolds, and now they come across this hill giant, and the hill giant, like his first instinct is to like corral them and then pick which one of them he wants to eat first. But maybe someone in your party thinks that they could trick the hill giant or negotiate with the hill giant. And I'll admit, this is another example where you can borrow influences from things, right? So in The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins was like crafty enough to kind of stall the trolls for a while, so that when Gandalf arrives and the sun arrives, the trolls get defeated by the sun and they turn to stone. Well, what if you had like a clever player in your party who negotiates with the hill giant and figures out a plan? Or maybe the hill giant, isn't a great strategist, but he's like, Grubnar won't eat you if you bring 4 cows and 2 pigs to Grubnar. Well, that's like I won't kill you if you go do this task for me. So now the party's in this quandary because now they have to go steal livestock from some local farm, but it's better than the hill giant, eating them, right? So the hill giant lets them go. Maybe they go do that. Maybe they honor their word to the hill giant. They bring back the food, and the hill giant is lazy, and it's like, okay, good, you can leave, bye. Or maybe the hill giant, maybe they try to skip out on the deal, and the hill giant after a while is like, wait a minute, where's those cows and hogs? And he goes looking for them, and then the party has to deal with or flee from a hill giant. So that's like at the low levels. You could use a hill giant for more than just like roll initiative, kill. You could have fun with the hill giant as a character and think like from the perspective of a lazy, food-obsessed primitive who doesn't want to go raid himself. Why wouldn't he make the party go do those things? So then I thought about this part down here, because in the book they refer to stupid and deadly. So they could digest nearly anything, and that's allowed them to survive for eons, eating and breeding in the hills like animals. They've never needed to adapt and change, so their minds and emotions remain simple and undeveloped. With no culture of their own, hill giants ape the traditions of creatures they manage to observe for a time before eating them. They don't think about their own size and strength, however. Tribes of hill giants attempted to imitate elves have been known to topple entire forests by trying to live in trees. So I gotta be honest, like as a DM, I think hill giants are kind of cute. I know they're not inherently good, and they're dummies, but they're kind of cute. There's something about their curiosity that makes it feasible for you to kind of use them in an adventure in a more innocent way because they don't know things. And I think, I know this is crazy maybe, but I think that hill giants, even though they are considered chaotic evil, what if you had a party that was like, oh, let's befriend this hill giant, What if they figured out a way through not just like one encounter, but through like repeated encounters with the hill giants to kind of like take away their tendencies towards evil and eating everything. So now I'm going to share an actual use of the hill giant that I did not use as a DM, but I encountered as a player. Okay, and this is currently in one of the side D&D games that I am not DMing, but I'm a part of. And DM Dan has created this scenario where a very powerful druid has kind of used magic to calm and pacify a family of hill giants. And actually they're like vegetarian. So like this setup was kind of interesting because like we came into it not knowing who these hill giants were, but like just seeing this fearsome battle, and then later got the context. But I thought it was kind of like cool, that like, hey, wait a minute, if a player character took time, or a group took time to like befriend the giants and gain their trust and like maybe bring them like offerings of food and like show that there's like some trust, maybe they could kind of over time condition the giants not to eat them. And then my brain working the way it is, I thought of George Romero's 1985 classic Day of the Dead. And if you're not familiar with this zombie movie, I'll summarize the part that I'm talking about. There's Dr. Logan basically trains a zombie to not be a zombie, to not eat him. And that's like the crux of like this conflict, this within the movie, one of the conflicts within the movie. But the idea that you could like train a zombie to not see a person as food was kind of interesting. And then I'm like, well, that was zombies, but like, couldn't you apply that to hill giants? Yes, you could. So I guess what I'm saying is when you're thinking about adventures with hill giants, it's easy to fall back on the stereotypes and the tropes of the hill giant just lumbering in and roll for initiative and roll dice to kill things. That kind of D&D game is fine, and that's certainly an option, but another way to expand your thinking about how to use monsters might be that maybe they're evil, their inherent evil, is simply just how they survive. It's how they live. And they are creatures of opportunity, and they're lazy, so a lot of times they eat innocent people, or they steal the livestock from farmers, leaving the farmers bereft and broke and, homeless or whatever. And obviously from a societal view, that would be evil, but that's just the behavior of these simple-minded creatures, right? Now, the part about them imitating what they see could also be an interesting twist. You might have like a culture or a settlement or a village or whatever that's kind of near where these hill giants lived, and the hill giants have kind of seen how they behave, and they start imitating that. And then the hill giants, again, kind of like innocently or unknowingly, kind of stumble into town because they think that they could just like blend in, right? Bunch of people freak out. The heroes, your party, are called. Oh, there's hill giants coming into the town. What do we do? Okay, so they could obviously be like, huzzah, and run into combat. Or maybe some of them cleverly figure out ways to kind of scare away or repel or just, contain the hill giants, or even persuade them not to attack the town. So these are options that you as a DM have to put into your brain first. You have to think about these things first. You have to consider like every possible scenario, every possible thing that your players might try to do in this situation. That way you're ready to improvise how you're going to react. This is what makes this idea of the encounter going into an adventure take seed. It's what gives it the fuel to be a possibility, because now this one encounter could become a whole adventure. Maybe they basically, without violence, they figure out a way to like solve the hill giant problem, but then they learn about the reason why the hill giants are even here in the first place, and they find out that there was some conflict between the hill giants and these other giants that drove the hill giants out of their original home, and now they have like nowhere to live. So you almost make them sympathetic, like you almost make the giants in a position where they're in a plight, and you're kind of sympathetic to them, and maybe you want to help them. If you think of things like that, this could become an adventure, which leads into a whole campaign, right? Imagine a party who has friends who are hill giants. Now, those are some awesome allies to have. They can carry things, they could build things for you, they can go into combat with you. Those are great allies to have, yeah? So then, is it possible to consider that the party would unite with those hill giants, become allies with them, go on adventures with them, and intertwined with those different adventures throughout your campaign is the plight of the hill giants, and maybe they're being persecuted by other giants within the rankings of the ordning. Something happened in giant society. I don't know, that's yet another kind of splinter thought process that I had about how you could use giants in a creative or innovative or different way. Another thing that I thought of was more related to this raging bullies thing, because it made me think about bullies in general. What motivates that? How does that work? How does that relationship work? A hill giant that feels as though it's been deceived, insulted, or made into a fool vents its terrible wrath on anything it encounters. Even after smashing those who offended it into a pulp, the giant rampages until its rage abates. It notices something more interesting, or it grows hungry. If a hill giant proclaims itself king over a territory where other humanoids live, it rules strictly by terror or tyranny. Its decisions shift with its mood, and if it forgets the title it bestowed upon itself, it might eat its subjects on a whim. So again, I think that the rage factor fitting in with the primitive lifestyle and kind of their way of living, almost I imagine it being sort of like tribal, familial groups, I think that could make for an interesting part as well. What if here's a thing that you could apply to any monster, but like, what if all monsters of this weren't the same? That's I know it seems very simple, but it's actually kind of deep. Like if you took that argument to dragons, what if not all dragons were the same? Well, they're not, right? Just like not all giants are the same. But within a group, what if you're like, what if not all red dragons were evil? What if not all hill giants were chaotic evil? So this bullying thing took place in my mind, and I said, what if there was bullying within hill giant like groups, communities? And there's like a really mean, big, just jerk of a hill giant who's been terrorizing the countryside, and a lot of these local settlements and villages and hamlets and farms have been, just attacked by this mean bully hill giant. And the party comes across a couple like beta hill giants. They're just kind of like, they're still hill giants, but they're not, they're not as intimidating. They're not as, barbaric maybe. And those two hill giants could be convinced or persuaded to rebel against the big, alpha jerk hill giant. And I thought about like, in The Wizard of Oz, when the Wicked Witch is finally killed, like her like soldiers were like relieved. They were happy. So they were serving her out of fear and tyranny in the same way that, hill giants rule by tyranny and bullying. But like when she was dead, the witch's, soldiers and guards and stuff were like relieved that she was dead, and they cheered for Dorothy because she killed the witch. Well, the same kind of principle could be applied to this hill giant scenario. You can have this bully hill giant who maybe has like other bully minions, but then there's like a couple within the ranks who are just kind of like curious and innocent hill giants, but they're like kind of caught up in this and they have to serve this guy, but maybe a clever party could entice them to like flip sides and join them against this. So you have so many ways to use hill giants, so many ways. They can be just, living their best life in a region, kind of locked to a certain area. They could be nomadic, kind of primitive nomadic groups who move from area to area, and they just happen to have moved into the region or kingdom wherever your party is, set. They could be found in some new area that your party is exploring. Maybe your party's gone like island hopping and they arrive at this island and it's full of hill giants, right? And maybe it has other, interesting things too. Or they're guarding something. Maybe these hill giants are like guarding something because they've been commanded to do so by some greater giant, like a fire giant or whatever. So there's a lot of options. Maybe you have some hill giants who, have been manipulated by a powerful wizard to do his bidding and to guard his tower. Maybe you have some hill giants who've been turned into like kind of nice guys and have been conditioned over time to like preserve life and to respect, nature and whatever, kind of like DM Dan did. So there are so many cool options and cool ways in which you can use hill giants in encounters, in adventures, and even throughout whole campaigns. And I think the key is, like I said, you have to think of them as like more than just the roll initiative, kill you kind of creature. You have to think of them as individuals and groups, and there are going to be differences amongst them. And that makes for kind of a richer encounter or adventure. Let's take a look at their stat block. The weakest, by far, that's one of the reasons why I think hill giants are useful, though, is because they are weak. They are huge. They have an armor class of 13. They have 10 D12 plus 40 hit points. So even on the low end, they're still pretty buff. Challenge rating 5. Yes, challenge rating 5. Their intelligence is 5. So when I say they're dummies, like they are not bright. They have a multi-attack. They have 2 Great Club attacks. They're plus 8 to hit, reach of 10 feet, and 3d8 plus 5. And then they have that rock throwing thing. Now I know with some of the other giant series I've suggested, you could flex those weapons out to make more sense with that specific giant or setting. And I think you could do that with the hill giants too, but like if ever there was a giant where it made sense to have them have like a tree trunk in one hand and a boulder in the other, it would be the hill giant, because they're primitive. They're not gonna have awesome armor, they're not gonna have awesome weapons, right? They're gonna have like whatever is available through natural resources. So if you wanted to scale hill giants up for your higher level adventures, right? Because if you threw 1 or 2 hill giants up against like a party that was like 10th level or 12th level, they would be nothing. Like they would deal with those pretty quickly. So how can you scale them up? Well, the obvious 2 reasons, as always, armor class, hit points. I did think of an option where I suppose you can come up with a reasonable explanation for why they would be scaled up, and that is if the hill giants were somehow serving fire giants. So if the fire giants were basically using the hill giants as minions. So imagine if fire giants crafted armor for their hill giant minions and gave them shields and helmets and big swords and axes. All of a sudden you'd have a very formidable hill giant. Your hill giant would have, armor class 18 instead of 13. And maybe, the damage stays the same, or maybe the damage goes up to closer to like what the fire giants do in terms of damage. Although the fire giants have much higher strength. So, but if you wanted to scale them up and kind of skin it in a narrative way, then you could come up with some arrangement which explains narratively why hill giants would be armored, right? And this is a classic technique. Like I've used it so many times in so many different games, not just D&D, but the idea that there are layers of bad guys, right? So you meet the initial bad guy, but there's always somebody behind that bad guy, and then there's somebody behind that bad guy, like so on and so forth, until you get to the big bad end guy, right? But the point is like you could have hill giants wearing armor forged by the fire giants who are bossing them around, but who's bossing the fire giants around? Well, you come up with that. Maybe it's a demon or a red dragon. Actually, that's a pretty dope idea. But that's another way if you wanted to kind of upscale these. Downscaling them is super easy. You basically just knock off some of their hit points and you make their damage do less. So you could take one hill giant and throw it up against a first or second level party if it's not doing that much damage and it has lower hit points. But the other thing of considering doing that kind of stuff is I'm not a big fan of like TPKs in the sense of like teaching players not to do dumb things. Like I think that players have to learn when to Leroy Jenkins into a battle and when to run away or when to negotiate or when to hide. So sometimes throwing in like a mid-range challenge rating kind of creature like a hill giant against some lower level people is a good opportunity to kind of test the mettle of your players, to see what they do in this situation. Are your players a group of Leroys who just want to run into battle and kill things? Then one of them might die in that encounter. Are they smarter? Are they maybe more sympathetic? Are they maybe more empathetic? Do they maybe want to try social interaction before it goes into combat? Are they sneaky? Maybe they just want to sneak into the hill giant's lair and get whatever they got to get. And you could set up these scenarios that are adventure-based so easily, right? If you go back to like my setup where you've got the group of hill giants in the region and they're terrorizing farms and stuff, maybe every once in a while, instead of livestock, they abduct people. And the big bully hill giant, the boss hill giant, has ordered his minions to go out and abduct some nice plump humans from the local area. And they've been corralled into this big pit that has like spikes on it, in their hill giant cave system, and they're trapped. And now the party has like another incentive to go there to rescue these people. So those are all kind of typical ways to intro a story, but that's the thing I like about the hill giant is that they're so versatile. You could use them anywhere, at any level, scaling them up or down as needed, and they can make for a really cool story. So I have shared what I know about hill giants and some ideas about how you could use them, but I'd love to hear from you. So please, if you're a DM and you have used hill giants, leave me a little message about it. Tell me the story about how you use them. And if you're a player who's encountered them, share those stories as well in the comments below, because I love to read that stuff. Until next time, we'll see you around. smallest and dumbest of the giants. It's time for the hill giant. Huzzah to the tipper!
Hello, mate. Thanks for watching all the videos. Make sure that you look up there and subscribe. And don't forget to check out some of the other videos, like them up there or those down there. We'll see you next time.